Thank you for joining us tonight. Tonight's Vesta presentation, Divorce to Keep the House or Sell the House During Divorce. My name is Renee, and I'm glad to have you here with us. So, at Vesta, our mission is to provide education, connection, and support to help you navigate the divorce process with some clarity and confidence. So, Vesta was started back in 2013. I can't believe it's been 13 years already. So Vesta came about because the three founders wanted a better experience for those going through divorce. They had experienced their own divorces and realized there weren't resources out there for people. So that's how Vesta came about. So tonight's session is focusing on keeping or selling the marital home, the family home. So certainly a topic that can feel overwhelming, but it's important to ensure your future stability and peace of mind. So we're glad to have you here with us tonight. So we have an experienced panel with us tonight of professionals who are going to share their insights on tonight's topic, covering everything from financial health, legal aspects, your mortgage and real estate, as well as your emotional state. And so keep in mind on this presentation that we're talking about New Hampshire law. So this is a New Hampshire hub for Vesta. So our attorneys on the call tonight will be talking about New Hampshire law. I encourage you to check out the Vesta website as we have other chapters in other states. Most of the rest of us on the call can work in any state, but the attorneys are specific to New Hampshire. What else did I want to mention? I think that was everything. I'm going to introduce you to the most important person, to Mandy, our concierge specialist here with Vesta.
Oh my goodness, you're too kind. Hi, everybody. My name is Mandy Pullenbar, and I am a concierge specialist with Vesta. And I'm really glad that you're with us tonight. Obviously, I'm not glad of the circumstances that you find yourself in, but I am happy that you found Vesta, a resource that was not available to me when I went through my divorce 18 years ago. And I made a lot of mistakes when I went through my divorce, which caused me to file bankruptcy 3 years post-divorce. So I want to help as many people as I can avoid being in the same predicament that I found myself in. 18 years later, everything is great, but it doesn't have to be that long of a road. We will be calling you after this event to hear how it was and where we can support you, whether that be connect you with all these amazing professionals that you're going to hear from today or one or two of them. We just earn that together and we build you a roadmap forward wherever you are in the process. We look forward to speaking with you, and I'll be putting my contact information in the chat. You can book a call or you can just give me a ring directly. Thank you. Oh, and grab a piece of paper and a pencil, take some note or a pen. Do people still have pencils? Yeah. Oh, they do. Take lots of notes. You're going to hear some great information. Talk to you soon.
Thank you, Mandy. So with that, I am going to pass it off to our first speaker tonight, Michelle. Take it away, Michelle.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. I am Michelle Papinder. I am a certified divorce coach. A divorce coach is someone who kind of walks alongside of you from before your divorce starts. Maybe you're just contemplating, maybe you're thinking about it. How do you go about asking for a divorce? Maybe you were just asked for a divorce. All the way, the coach can be with you all the way to the end. They're a great person to help you make decisions. And one of those biggest decisions is keeping the house or selling the house. And the marital house has so many emotions generally tied to it: sadness, anxiety, fear. Do you keep the house and remain in the house? Do you keep the house and your spouse remains in the house? Working with a coach will help you think through those decisions and think through all the options so that you can make the best decision for yourself, emotionally and financially. So, reasons people consider keeping the house: stability for yourself, possibly for your children. Seems like the best route to take during this time of uncertainty. Comfort and continuity. You're already experiencing a lot of loss, so staying in the home might help you adjust or stay in your comfort zone during the divorce. But I'm going to get to it in a second, but you also want to think about your future when it comes to the home. Do you have an emotional attachment to the home? You're in a place where you're making such big decisions, and sometimes it just feels better just to stay in the house. But again, Those are big decisions to make. And is it fear of the unknown? Things like, where will I live if I don't live here? What will it look like? Will I live? How will I live alone? I found myself in my 40s for the first time in my entire life living 50% alone, 50% with my 11-year-old. I did get a dog, so that was very helpful. So I wasn't quite so lonely 50% of the time. As a coach, I encourage you to really think about why you want to stay in the home, right? And we would work together to talk about why you want to stay in the home, the emotional reasons, the financial reasons, the stability, the kids, even adult kids, right? Maybe your adult children are living with you. So, what does it look like if you keep the home and now you're living in the home alone? So you're now the sole person responsible to pay any of the bills, maintain the property. Here in the Northeast, we have things to think about like snow removal. Think about the winter we just had. If you're used to your spouse taking care of a lot of the snow removal, arranging for a plow truck or doing the snow blowing or whatever you might do at your property. Now we're into spring. Sometimes you have to mow the grass twice a week in the spring here. So yeah, there's all these considerations to think about when you are considering keeping the home. Even things like, what if the hot water heater, breaks? What if a pipe bursts? You have to be prepared. And when you're working with a coach, we talk about those things. It's somebody who can be here for you to talk through those things and think through those things. And they can be very nerve-wracking. Trust me, I know, I've been there. I had something burst. I don't even think I was in my new house 2 months, and I didn't know what to do. How will you feel living in the home alone? Is it the house, the marital house? Are you staying in that house? And how are you going to feel? Like all of a sudden now, maybe 50% of the time you're there with your kids, or maybe now you're always alone or with your new dog. How is that going to feel? And we would talk through, how does that feel and how might you feel? Maybe you have no idea how you'll feel. Or we can talk even about how you do feel and maybe how we can ease that anxiety or whatever feeling you might be having. And how will you feel living there? There's lots of good memories that may feel like bad memories when you are in the home that you raised your family in and or spent with your spouse. Reasons you might consider selling the home: financial strain. You're affording it together, you're taking care of the property together, you're raising the family together in the home. And so we talk about, can you afford the home? Maybe you don't know yet, but we can together build a budget. You can work with a certified divorce financial analyst who you'll be hearing from shortly. But during the whole process, I would encourage you to be open-minded about the home and trying not to make any decisions until you've really heard everybody on your team, building that team so that you can make the best decisions for yourself. Selling the home could provide you with money that you might need to get a new place. Staying in the home might hinder your emotional healing. Like I said before, memories can be both good and bad, depending. Does staying in the home align with your long-term goals? Earlier, I mentioned when you're working with a coach or a therapist, you can set goals, short-term goals, long-term goals, and just staying in the home align with those goals. It might feel right short-term, but does it feel right long-term? Maybe it's just you have a large house and pretty soon the kids are going to be in college or graduated, and it just doesn't make sense to be in that house long-term. Does the home truly provide stability? Would a new home, possibly a more affordable home, offer you more long-term peace and healing? And sometimes selling the home is a necessary step to move forward. And just a couple other things to think about is if you do keep the home and you're not the one living in it, how does that feel? What does that look like, right? Or maybe the kids are going back and forth, so maybe you're dropping off or picking up at the house that you used to live in. How is that going to feel? How's it going to feel if the kids want to spend possibly more time at that house because they've lived a certain amount of years there? Again, I moved out, so I know how that feels, that my son to this day, who's an adult, even though his dad got a new house, prefers to be at that house. and then talking about obtaining a new home or renting and nesting, which I think Adrian is going to talk a little bit about towards the end of our webinar. So thank you, everybody. I'm Michelle Papandrea. I'll put my email address in the chat so everyone can get in touch with me if you choose.
Thanks, Michelle. Hi, everyone. I'm Kate Blake. I'm a family law attorney. I am licensed in both Massachusetts and New Hampshire, but this is the New Hampshire hub. So what I am talking about really just pertains to New Hampshire specifically. My practice encompasses helping people through the out of court process. So if they are in mediation, I help one side through mediation. I also am collaboratively trained. So I do collaborative divorce. I do direct attorney negotiation, and then a component of my practice is also litigation in the court system itself. So, a couple things that I just wanted to go over from the legal perspective. New Hampshire is an equitable distribution state. Equitable does not mean equal, but generally, the longer a marriage goes on, the more likely that assets are going to be divided approximately equal. And with respect to equitable distribution in New Hampshire, all assets, regardless of how they are acquired, when they are acquired, or whose name they are in, is considered a marital asset. Title to the marital home may only be in one person's name, but does not exclude it from being part of the marital estate, and it does not exclude it from being divided as part of the divorce. So what do we consider when we think about net equity? And I think some of our later speakers will be talking about this, so I'll just briefly talk about this. Essentially, we need to figure out what the value of the house is, fair market value. That can be as simple as you and your spouse agreeing to the value. You could have somebody like Laura, a real estate agent, come in and give you a comparative market analysis, or you could have a formal appraisal done of the property. Once you have the value of the property, you then reduce it by any outstanding liens on that. So a first mortgage, a second mortgage, a home equity line, perhaps there was some home improvements that were taken out. All of that needs to be taken into consideration. And then you get the net equity. And that is the amount that needs to be divided between you and your spouse. Either one of you buys out the other or the property is sold. If the property is going to be sold, then you don't necessarily need something like an appraisal to figure out the net equity. And one thing that is important to note is that a buyout can sometimes mean that somebody is receiving more in equity than they might if the property were sold, because the only thing that is taken into consideration during a buyout is those mortgages. And things like hypothetical brokers commission or needed improvements to the property are unfortunately not taken into consideration to determine the. While your divorce is pending, there does need to be some arrangement or agreement about how living situation is going to continue and how expenses are going to be paid for. Unless there is a court order, and that would be something like a domestic violence order of protection or a temporary order, it's assumed that you and your spouse will continue to live together during the divorce, even though that may be uncomfortable. If there is an agreement, I always make sure that people have an agreement also on parenting time, because you don't want to leave the house without having an agreement on how children's time is going to be shared between the two of you. So you can continue to live together, you can separate. There is also something called nesting, which Michelle briefly mentioned. Nesting, in my experience, is the type of situation that is really only good for a discrete time period with clear parameters. And I think you'd be very hard pressed to find any judge who would order nesting as part of a temporary arrangement. Consequences of moving out of a house before the divorce is final. So in terms of financial, there really is no consequence. Moving out of the home does not mean that you are giving up any of the equity in the home. What I do tell people is that moving out can make it very difficult to move back in. If you think that you want to keep that house post-divorce, then you really should not move out, because it can make it very difficult to get back into the property. The other
word of advice that I usually make with respect to moving out is try to have some type of agreement on how personal property is going to be divided. Unfortunately, when somebody moves out, divorces can take a while. They could take upwards of 6 months, 6 to 12 months, if not longer. Personal property, particularly smaller items, sometimes have a way of disappearing, particularly if there's any sentimental pieces of personal property. You want to make sure that you are bringing that with you when you move out. If you can't agree, the judge is going to look at both of your abilities to buy out the other person. The judge will consider factors like keeping children in a school system. But ultimately, if you and your spouse cannot agree about what's going to happen with the house, then the judge will make a decision. And I have often seen judges say, if you can't agree, then we're just going to sell the house. The unfortunate reality of divorce is that judges are just looking to disentangle people. They do not have a lot of ability to correct wrongs that have happened during your relationship. They don't really look to punish people. They just want to figure out how to make a clean financial separation. And I know Michelle talks about this, but and Adrian will as well. But selling the home, kids are resilient. They don't necessarily need to be living in that home. I think sometimes people tend to try and stay in a home without really thinking through all the financial ramifications of that, which I know some of our later speakers will get into. And then the final piece that I wanted to go over on this slide is about post-divorced nesting. So that, again, is not something that I think a judge would order, but you and your spouse certainly could agree to that. But it needs to have very specific parameters of how is this going to work? How long is it going to work for? Is there some type of safety release that if this is not working anymore, that we can stop this nesting arrangement? And then what happens to the house? So again, you just really need to think through those types of arrangements. And I think sometimes working outside of court through the mediation process, you can really think through a lot of those different options and you can be much more creative than you can in a litigated process. Then I am going to turn this over to Lori. She's going to give you her thoughts from the mediation side.
Hello, my name is Lori Barrett. I'm also an attorney licensed in New Hampshire, Connecticut, and Massachusetts. And both Michelle and Kate gave a lot of great information about what's involved in a divorce from the legal perspective and also from the emotional side. And so mediation is a wonderful place to factor in both in resolving the issues surrounding your divorce. It is a space and a place where you're working on your own timeline for the most part. This is if you haven't started litigation. If you have started litigation, you can always pause the litigation, demediation, and then continue the litigation. But actually, New Hampshire courts, they encourage mediation. So whether you have already started your litigation or you're just starting the divorce process and you don't want to start a litigation process, but you do want to mediate, you can certainly mediate before any legal action is filed. So mediation is a place where, like I said, it's your own space. You do it on your timeline if you're not already in litigation, where you can talk about the issues, where you can be creative. Both parties have to be willing to do it. So, and both parties have to be willing to negotiate and give and take. And back to what Michelle said, there's a lot of emotions involved. So that might be a very difficult thing to have happen, where both parties are willing to put aside their emotions and egos to actually sit down and get down to the business of divorce. But that's what a specialist, a professional like a divorce coach like Michelle can help you with, can help you work through those emotions to get some clarity as to what needs to be done and what needs to be focused on. Assume both parties are willing to sit down and give and take. It's a great space for that creativity in solutions. Number one, or specifically for this webinar, keeping the house. If somebody's really has an emotional tie to the house or wants to keep the home, the mediation table is a place to explore that with the other party. And mediation is a place where both parties are heard, are allowed to speak, are allowed to express their concerns, and there's a guarantee that they will be heard by the other party. That's part of the process. If that doesn't happen, then mediation doesn't work. But if they're both committed to mediation, then they will agree as part of the agreement to mediate to hear the other person and be willing to take into account everybody's needs and wants. It is a great place to work out all of the legal issues outside of the courtroom, and your rights are still protected. You're highly encouraged to get an attorney to either consult with you during the mediation as a divorce consultant outside of the mediation, or at least when the agreement is done, to have the attorney look at it to make sure that it is fair and equitable and that it is in your best interest. So it's a great way for both parties to come out a winner, as opposed to the courtroom where one party is going to win, one party is going to lose. It's a zero-sum game, and it's very expensive. So while you might not get everything you want at the negotiation table, the mediation table, you'll walk out of there feeling comfortable that you at least that the emotions were addressed, they were factored in, you came to a solution and a resolution that you're comfortable with, and that is durable for you both in the short term and in the long term. And that's also one of the key benefits of mediation, is that it reduces conflict not only during the divorce process, but afterwards. Because if you have an agreement that both of you are comfortable with, and you've looked ahead and tried to see what's important to you and what you need. Let's say if you keep the house, as Michelle said, who's going to pay for the maintenance? If you agree to that at the mediation table and you get to keep the house, then the conflict when the next winter comes about, who's going to pay for the maintenance, or one person can't do it, so they file a motion in court to get more money from the other party, that increases conflict, that increases court time. So having something worked out at a mediation table can avoid situations like that. And it goes for children as well. It goes for custody and so child support and things like that. It really is a great place for just to empower both of you and your spouse to make decisions that work both in the short term and the long term, and allow you to have the peace you need for the next phase in your life, the transition from one home to two homes. The same thing with whether to keep the house, to buy out, to sell. There's a lot of creative solutions at the table in addition to buy out or sell. And as Kate said, if you're in litigation and you're going back and forth, the court is going to make a decision you have to sell. And that's not going to be good for the person who really wants to keep the house. So at the mediation table, you can work out creative solutions. There's a lot of them. I can't go into each one, but there's a lot of creative solutions where the end result of selling the house doesn't have to happen. So it's a really good option to explore. Number one, because for everything that I've said, but also it saves a lot of money. It is considerably less expensive than litigation. And it's a neutral ground for the tough conversations, as I said. And one person is not controlling the conversation. One party does not dictate what happens. It does provide, in my opinion, the most peaceful resolution to a divorce. There is collaborative law Kate has talked about. I also do collaborative law. It is the same premise, except it's a more structured environment. You work with a team during the collaborative session. So there's a CDFA, there's a CDLP, there's a lot of financial people involved in that as you go through it, but it is an out-of-court process, and the parties agree not to litigate, which is different than mediation, because you don't agree not to litigate in mediation, but in collaborative law, you agree not to litigate. And if you do decide to litigate, your collaborative divorce attorneys can't represent you in litigation, so you have to get another attorney. If you want to avoid that, mediation really is a great place to start. And again, it's not mutually exclusive. You can start mediation, and then if it doesn't work out, you can then go to litigate. I think that's all I have. Kate, do you have anything to add regarding the mediation or collaborative divorce process?
No, I don't think so. I think you covered it all.
Okay. Thank you. I'm going to put my information in the chat box if you'd like to speak with me.
Hi, everyone. Good evening. My name is Laura Gamache. I'm a real estate broker. I, too, am also licensed in New Hampshire and Massachusetts. If you are not located in either of these states, I do have resources throughout the country. So please feel free to still reach out and I can put you in touch with someone on a more local level if you are in need of anything real estate related. With that, definitely making some decisions when it comes to this topic is very important and can be a very difficult decision and this can very go back and forth until a decision is made many times. So I truly focus primarily on divorce situations and the selling of homes. So I definitely can really speak to how every scenario and every divorce and everyone's position is just very completely different. So it can really just see of putting what the priorities are when it comes to the home to the top of the list and how can we get to the goal of that in the most smoothest way. And myself, typically in the mediator, so to say, between both parties. Sometimes they are communicating amongst themselves, sometimes they are not. And I am the one that is kind of keeping both parties up to speed, more or less, with any decision making when it comes to that. So, with that said, of course, majority of the time, the home is their most valuable asset. Yeah, as some people have, whether they have investment properties, also that we are discussing. Do they own businesses that we need to discuss to put some monetary value? Do I need to bring in a business broker? Do I need, are we talking some commercial properties? So real estate can really encumbersome a lot more than just the home. But for many parties, the single family home is a very much a big topic for discussion when it comes to that. Like I mentioned, it's being proactive, the communication, and really just, again, what's the best option for you? When the divorce settlements are final, I make the very, very aware for everybody that's final. That means that it is done. So many people think they've come to this agreement with what they're going to do with the home. Divorce, they go through all payment of attorneys, and then divorce decree is settled, and then they're like, oh no, but I wanted to do this. That's too late. That is too late. So pulling in this team that is here in front of you is extremely crucial. If you are in the early stages, in the midst of it all, it doesn't matter what stage you're at. If you have not engaged with parties that are on this panel right now, I strongly encourage you to do and to have all this information for free will extremely help your position or whatever you're at, because we're going to give you all of that advice that majority of us pretty much say to all of our clients that I wish you came to us sooner. So I think all of us can probably speak to that. Moving on to the next slide is really now moving into the process of the options of selling the home, right? So, of course, every seller, their goal at the end of the day is to get the highest value for their home. So, what does that entail? So, some have already touched upon is preparing a comparative market analysis, right? So, that is what any real estate agent or broker can provide. Typically, we do not charge a fee for that. And we can come and we can do pretty much that. The difference between a real estate agent and an appraiser is one, a real estate agent, we provide a market range based upon the closed comparables that we pull that look similar to your type of property. A real estate appraiser, they are licensed and they are certified appraiser that they're going to give you one exact number of how they feel that your property is worth. And they're going to give you a 40-page report of all the adjustments between all of the comparables that they have pulled. And your house has a fireplace. This one does not. This one has a 2-car. This one has a 1-car, etc. So they give a breakdown of that completely, but they're going to give you an exact price on what they feel that property is worth. So myself, market analysis, zero cost to you. Licensed appraiser that you're paying, they can charge upwards of $700. I've had many different occasions that I'm coming in, I'm providing that market analysis. They're using that dollar, that number, because they need that for your attorneys, right? So that for the Kate and the Lori, they need to know what dollar amount are we negotiating over here based upon what the value is of your property. So I'm working very closely with many attorneys early on in the stages before they start negotiations. They need to know what their house is actually worth. I've done it in different certain scenarios that each party is getting their own market analysis done and we're comparing apples. Again, many different scenarios can be handled that way. A lot of the times I'm discussing, okay, how do we need to increase options to increase the value of the home? Sometimes when people are going through divorce, they have other things that have fallen on their plate. And then with the families, that it's gotten very contentious and many things of the home maintenance has fallen to the wayside. So a lot of the discussions that if we are deciding to sell the home, that we might need to focus on if some things have not been attended to. If someone hasn't attended to the grounds of the property, trying to get the curb appeal? Have we done any servicing of the systems? Right. So a lot of those items, do we need to do some quick painting because some things have gotten chucked and dings against the wall and some doors have been slammed and whatnot? Yeah, many of those things, it's real. And I see it in the homes, and we want to tend to those so we don't have a buyer walking in the door and it screams divorce all over it. So in order to do that, I'm having the conversations with the sellers on how are we going to do this? How is this going to be handled? And again, many times one party who's paying for it, or they're keeping all track because that's everything that we're going to go and we're going to give that to the attorneys to make sure they account for that come closing time, that equal disbursements all along that. But again, I'm walking through that process with them and we're discussing how the sales process and the market timing and what we touched upon too is just, okay, if we're selling, where are you going to be moving to next? Right. Renee is going to talk to more in the depths of qualifying for the mortgage. Mine is really just if we are going to be looking to purchase a property following the sale of this property, we also need to start that process now as well. So it's really having the discussions on that of what the goal is. Are you going to be renting? Are you going to be living some interim living? Are you moving with family? Are you buying? So conversations we need to have much earlier on, because at the end of the day, no one wants to be homeless. So those kind of come into segue into those contingencies to manage the transition to your new home. Or do we have to make it subject to you finding suitable housing? Is that contingency? So yes, we're going to sell, but it's going to make sure I find something first before we close on the sale of this house. These are just some quick stats you'll see at the bottom of this, which you probably read through already. So just existing home sales is new construction. Just so quick, some stats on a national level. I knew we had people from all over. So this is on a national level here. So existing home sales of new construction, the 2025 was pretty stagnant. So we only had a plus 3%. That projection was forecasted for 2026 to increase by 14%. So we'll see if that actually does happen. We are starting to see more of that new construction across the existing home sales that's existing. Below that is new home sales. So we are seeing that uptake of that is still a seller's market. Different areas of the country can have different parts of a different type of market. So again, I'm here in New England. I'll speak that we are very much still in the seller's market. But we have started definitely seen a softening, but some other parts of the country, they have seen much more of a softening in their days on market upticking and a lot more price reduction. So depending on where you're at, just reach out and I'll put you in touch with somebody that knows your market very well. Medium home sales price, seeing those again, still ticking up a little bit. Mortgage rates, again, Renee, I'll have her touch on that of where we are in today's current kind of climate. And then I'll segue into the next slide, please. Thank you. And again, keeping it along the terms of keeping the home, that which again, Renee's going to speak more into, but you just need to talk to a mortgage advisor ASAP if you are thinking of you're going to keep the home. And I'll let her talk to that because you don't want to be house poor. Many things have, again, the capital gains, and again, the financial people will speak more to that, but different things when you go from married to divorce here in New Hampshire, it is very different when it comes to selling a property, depending on how your status is, which is at the end of December of that year. If you're claiming that you are single or married, that following year is how you're going to be doing your taxes. I'll let them to speak into that more. But other than that, really, when we're discussing how the financials are going to be going, I can divvy out and do that seller's breakdown of what that's going to look like and who's going to be getting what. So we know when we're approaching that closing table, there are no fists that's going to be thrown. We already know how it's going to be split, who's getting what percentage, what amount, 50-50, with deductions of X, Y, and Z. So we got that, and then we can really smooth along. Or if you're keeping the home, Renee will speak a little bit more into what that looks like for buying your partner out or refinancing, etc. And then segueing into the next one is really just more of another snapshot into the next slide, please. Again, like I've already spoke on, I've been just knowing if you're keeping the home, you're still going to need to know what that market analysis is. Again, some people, if they don't agree on their market analysis, they have to go into the appraisal. When paying for that, already spoke upon just that net sheet and the breakdown of all of the financials. So moving into the last slide for me, these are just kind of complementary services that we can obviously provide. I've already touched on a handful of those. Divorce Dilemma Guide, this can be just more speaking to you directly on where you are in your divorce and how we can assist from that certain position, because everybody, like I mentioned, different parts of the divorce and different scenarios of what kind of means to them. We can keep you people while I start, and it takes 2 years. sometimes even longer for that. So I like to keep them updated on a monthly, if not quarterly, of where we are for the market analysis on your property or the market area in general. So just really making sure we keep on track of that. So that value we're watching, is it changing as we're going throughout this process and heading into that again, because it just depends on where we're at with that. Like I mentioned before, referral network of just many people that kind of really just handle this specialty of in this. Many are here in this panel, but we all have other resources if needed that kind of touch into the divorce kind of realm. Or for myself, if we're going into keeping the home and we just need, if something goes wrong and we need a contractor out there, I have a handful of contractors to me that they drop everything they get to houses to help. So we're just having those people that have those resources and connections is just crucial, that myself, my team, and anyone that's going to be your representative should definitely question to make sure they have that to help you, should that be the case. Because Michelle touched upon, if you're new to this and going to be a homeowner for the first time and somebody else going to manage a lot of that, you need to make sure you have someone that you can quickly call to help you with that. Then moving on, then here we go. This is truly my last slide now. So this is just a pulse as of right now. So for as of May 2026, again, on a National Association of Realtors, this is a quick stat from them. Dr. Lawrence Young, he's our chief economist, brilliant man, definitely knows all the numbers and keeps a pulse on the market of the US in general. So as he kind of quote unquote, more Americans are on the move with home sales rising to the highest level since December. This is great news for the housing market and the economy, quote unquote. So I couldn't agree more. We are definitely seeing more people coming that are actually selling, that are buying, but they have a home sale contingency, and or vice versa. People are selling, but they need subject to find suitable housing. We haven't seen those contingencies in a number of years. So it's showing that we're moving a little bit more back towards a balanced market with those types of contingencies. So not every home is flying off the market and having a handful of offers in, like many years ago. It was just a little bit of the norm, quote unquote, where we're seeing that cool. So we're seeing sellers more accepting of contingencies such as that. That is a good sign, because we need that kind of healthy circle of our real estate market. People that are in their first time home, they want to sell, but they need, in order to buy, they need to sell that, etc. So we're seeing that, and vice versa. People that want to downsize, they want to make sure they can find something healthy. Great. We like seeing that, just for people to have those opportunities and more options out there, as our in general inventory is definitely still has been increasing our levels. So you'll kind of just see a little bit of some snapshots of existing homes sales. Again, we're at 4.17 million homes for sale currently right now as of May 2026 on a national level at 1.55 month supply. So again, how long is it going to take my house to sell on a national level is about 4.5 months. So again, a little bit different again, but more on a local level. The median sales price you'll see here at a national level, 429, 300. And I will tell you that here in New England, to get something at 429 for a single family can be pretty challenging. So different parts of the country, New Hampshire alone, for our average sales price, we're at 560. So if you're a first time home buyer coming in at right under that, it can be a little bit competitive, but we can get it done. But it's just having someone that really knows the market behind you. So thank you, everyone. I know that was a lot of information thrown out at you. If you have any questions, please, I'll put my stuff in the chat as well. Reach out wherever you are, and I will connect you with somebody that will definitely give you some good guidance and help. Thank you.
Thank
Renee,
you.
take it over. Sorry.
Yes, thank you. Sorry, my camera stuck there for a second. All good information, great stats. The national level compared to the New Hampshire/New England, we're in a good position here still to get some equity in our homes. A little more challenging to purchase, but like Laura said, it's doable. We can help. Again, welcome everybody. I'm Renee Coleman. I am a residential mortgage lender. I'm a certified divorce lending professional, and I'm also the founder of a company called Divorce Mortgage Planning of New England. So we help our clients understand all of their options, right? Most of our clients will come to us and say, I'm getting divorced and I want to keep the house. It's my job to put the numbers together and help you understand, is that an option and is it the right thing for you? So I can tell you if you qualify for a mortgage, but you'll want to talk to somebody like our next speaker, Barb. She is a CDFA, a certified divorce financial advisor, who's going to have a better feel for your entire financial future as opposed to just the house and making a financial decision that's only looking at the house. So with that, can I keep the house? Can I buy my spouse out? Do we have to sell? Can I assume the mortgage? Can we co-own the house for a while? All of these things that I'm sure running through your head and you're trying to make sense of it all. So what does it all mean? So it will matter who's on the title of the property and who's on the mortgage. Ownership, it's a marital asset, regardless of whether you're on the title or you're on the mortgage. But when it comes to keeping the home, if that's your choice, it will matter who's on title and for how long and who's on the mortgage. So we can help you with that and understand what your options are. But typically speaking, we generally will see one spouse wants to keep the house. Excuse me. As a few of our panelists have already talked about, splitting the assets, that division of assets, that's the biggest first step. And so we have to know the value, right? You can't divide something until we know the value. And Laura explained the difference between an appraisal and a market analysis. So either one of those can work for you to come up with a value of the house and then to understand how to split it. However, not all assets are equal. And I'm sure Barb will talk about this, but I just want to mention, if you have $100 in cash and $100 in equity in your house and $100 in a retirement account, those are three very different assets and they're not necessarily equal. And mainly because there are tax implications. And one of those tax implications with the home is capital gains tax. And again, I think Barb is going to speak to that tonight. But generally speaking, if you own a house and you bought it for this price and you sell it for this price, that gain is what's taxed. And it's called capital gains tax when we're talking about real estate. And so if you're the spouse keeping the house, and again, we're very fortunate that we have a lot of equity in our homes here in New Hampshire, but just know that there could be some tax consequence to you down the road if you're the spouse keeping the house. So you want to make sure to take that into consideration before we're splitting those assets. Make sure you know all of the issues that taxes that might come up. Next slide, please, Michelle. So qualifying for a mortgage. So now we have a value to the house and we need to determine how much equity there is in the house. So to determine the equity, it's how much is the house worth and how much do you owe on the mortgage currently? And that's your equity. And that's what's being split is the equity in the house. Now, it's not necessarily 50-50. It's fair and equitable, as we heard Kate mention. So it can be different numbers and there's different circumstances that would allow the numbers to be different than 50-50. That's a question for your attorney or your mediator. They can help you with that. But from a lender's perspective, we're going to look at some numbers and determine what do you qualify for. If the equity is X and we're splitting it, can we get those funds from a mortgage? The earlier you talk with us, the earlier we can put those numbers together so that you know exactly what you can qualify for as a buyout to your spouse. And when I say buyout, I just mean the equity that's in the house that's being split. It doesn't necessarily have to come from the mortgage. It could come from other assets. You can mix assets and swap this for that. Again, knowing that they're not exactly equal, but we can also get it from the mortgage. And so to get it from the mortgage requires a refinance. So we do a refinance and we take some of that equity out. So if you're the spouse wanting to keep the house, you have to qualify for that mortgage. So again, talking with us early to understand what the numbers are. We don't want you to negotiate for something that you can't qualify for. It breaks my heart when somebody comes to me post-divorce and says, great, I was awarded the house and I have to refinance, and we put the numbers together and you don't qualify. Now you've gone through all of the effort of the negotiation and for something that you don't qualify for. So we want to know upfront. So I'll give you an example. If you owe $300,000 on your house and you're keeping the house and you owe the departing spouse $50,000. We can get it from the mortgage so long as you qualify. We're going to do a new mortgage for $350,000. We're going to pay off your existing mortgage of $300, and the remaining $50 is going to go to your spouse as the buyout. Now that $350, that new mortgage for $350, that's what you have to qualify for. So that's what we want to make sure. As Laura said, once you sign on that line, that's it. You're done and done. That's it. You can't go back. And so we want to make sure that we know upfront that you actually qualify for that and that we can execute post-divorce on that refinance. Now, credit is going to be super important. You need good credit no matter what your housing looks like post-divorce, whether you're keeping the house and you have to refinance, whether you're selling the house and buying another house, whether you're renting, all of those scenarios are going to require a good credit score. Closing accounts actually hurts your credit, so be very careful with that. Talk with a lender first. We will walk you through that. We have programs to help you if your credit needs some help, but we can tell you the things to do and not to do to help with your credit score. Paying your bills on time. We know that this is a stressful time and you have a lot on your plate, but we want to make sure that you're paying your bills on time. You know what debts are in your name, so we make sure they're being paid on time. A late payment on something really has a huge negative impact on your credit. So just paying attention to that and knowing what debts are in your name, right? And take a look at your credit report. You can get a free credit report. Lots of places have them now. Credit Karma is a place that you could get them. A lot of credit cards now offer a monthly credit report that you can look at. Take a look at it. Make sure you're understanding what debts are in your name. Sometimes we forget, right? There's an old credit card out there and we forget that it's in our name. So just make sure you're taking credit into consideration. The next piece is income. So we have to look at income to understand what we can use for income to qualify you for a mortgage. So one of the things that I get asked most often, can we use child support and or alimony to qualify for a mortgage? And the short answer is yes, you can use that to qualify, but there's some rules around it. And so again, you want to make sure you're talking to a lender early so that we make sure that your final settlement agreement is written up in a way that we can actually execute the refinance or the purchase post-divorce using that income if we need that support income to qualify. So make sure you're getting the rules on that. There's some time frames that you have to receive it before we can use it as income and where it's being received. So lots of rules around it. So talk with us to understand those options on the income. So now we have a value of the house. Oh, sorry. One more slide back, Michelle. Thanks. Oh, sorry. Nope. I'll be all right. Next slide. I gave the example of a buyout and what does a buyout look like, right? Maybe some different numbers here, but different from calculating your equity on a buyout. That's a separate calculation than capital gains. Remember, equity is the difference between the value of the house and what you owe, but a gain for capital gains tax purposes is really what you've purchased the house for and what you sell it for. So capital gains doesn't take into consideration any mortgages that you might have on the house. So I just wanted to make sure that was clear. So one thing I get asked a lot today is also about mortgage assumptions, right? Most of us have a pretty low interest rate right now, and we're not wanting to refinance into a higher interest rate, understandably. So a mortgage assumption is something where you take over the existing mortgage as is. So if you've got a 2.75 interest rate with 25 years left on the term and you owe $200,000, that loan stays exactly the same and your spouse is removed from that liability. Now, you need permission from the lender to do that. They don't just say, oh, sure, we'll take spouse B off and leave spouse A on the mortgage. You have to actually qualify for that. There's a process that's involved, but not every lender does them. Not every lender allows them. Check with your lender specifically. You can call your servicer, who you're making your mortgage payment to. So not necessarily your loan officer, but your servicer, where you're making your monthly payments to, and you can ask them about an assumption. Now, a couple of rules around the assumption. So all of the terms stay the same. Your divorce has to be settled, has to be finalized because the lender will want a copy of the final divorce agreement. If there are any buyouts owed to your spouse, those have to be completed before they will allow an assumption. and you can't get it from the mortgage on an assumption. So you get it from other assets that you might have available. If you're going to get a gift from a family member for the buyout, maybe you're going to get an equity loan for the buyout, but that has to be completed before an assumption is allowed. So again, your divorce has to be settled. No cash can come from the mortgage. You do have to qualify for it, and any buyouts to your spouse have to be completed before a lender will even discuss an assumption. So that's assuming the mortgage. Titles and deeds. So I just wanted to mention quickly that there's two separate things, right? There's the mortgage and there's the title or the deed to the property. So the mortgage is who is responsible for making the payments, but the title or the deed is who has ownership in the house. And so post-divorce, that needs to be addressed in the divorce settlement, right? Is if one spouse is keeping the house, likely what's going to happen is when you either refinance or you do an assumption, whatever the case might be, and if you owe something to your spouse, it all happens at the same time. In exchange for receiving the buyout, the departing spouse receives their funds from you, from the mortgage, and at the same time, they're going to sign a quitclaim deed. So a quitclaim, Q-U-I-T, quitclaim is what is used to remove somebody from the title of the home. So that quitclaim will now just have your name on the deed. Your spouse is removed and your spouse receives their buyout funds. So that's really the top level of qualifying and all of your options and all the things that you need to think about. I want to reiterate, speak with a lender early. We don't want you to fight for something that you don't qualify for. You'll spend all that time and energy and money with either your mediator or your attorney to qualify for something or finalize something that you don't qualify for. So we work in conjunction with the rest of your team. Like I mentioned earlier, I can tell you if you qualify for a mortgage, but I'm also going to have you talk with a financial advisor like Barb, our next speaker, to make sure that's the right thing for you financially. We will work with your team, your attorney, your mediator. Again, we want whatever you've negotiated, we want it to be executable post-divorce, so we can help with that. So with that, I am going to turn it over to our next speaker. I am going to put my contact information in the chat so you can see it. I'm also going to share a few links for you that you can check out with some free resources. Barb, take it away.
Okay, great. Thanks. Can everyone see me okay?
Yep.
Okay, great. I'm on my phone right now because I'm not in my office and I grabbed the wrong computer. So my daughter's a little upset with me right now. I'm going to do my best from my phone, but I didn't want to miss tonight because usually the house is the largest asset that you have. So it's really important that you think long and hard about what in a marital asset division you're going to do. And what I thought I would do is share some of the common issues that come up often. And I would say the most common one is affordability. And also remember, the question isn't, can I keep the house or can I not? What do you want? Do you want to keep the house? Do you feel that you can afford the house? For many of my clients, they decided to stay in the house and then realized that maybe it was their spouse that did a lot of work around the house, and now they're having to hire someone. There's a lot of considerations that go into it. Are you going to have new expenses? I'm not handy at all. So if I stayed in a house that needed work, I would have to call someone for almost everything, and that's not the current case in my house. There's a lot of things to think about. Sometimes you're at a point in your life where you're ready to downsize or find, let's say, live in a townhouse. That's all okay. You don't feel like your decision is either stay in the house or not stay in the house. Really, affordability is another key. The second I see is really, and Renee also talked about this, is really not considering any of the tax consequences in the house. So one thing to always keep in mind is everyone has a $250,000 capital gain exclusion. And if you
are married, you have a $500,000 capital gain exclusion. Now, you only have to live in the house the last 2 out of the 5 years. So, for example, you could co-own the house for 2 years and have one person stay in the house and sell it after a year or 2 years and still have each collect the $250,000 exclusion. So, if you decide to stay in the house and let's say there's 500,000 in equity and you're now the sole owner of the house, that's 250,000 you're going to have to pay capital gain taxes on. So that's a roughly, let's say 25,000. So it's not a significant amount and it will go up exponentially as you get over that $250,000 threshold, but enough that you really should think about it. Also, if let's say in a year you decide to sell the house, now you're going to have to incur all the selling expenses. So it's a much bigger decision than can I afford it, right? So you want to consider all these things. We also look at the long term, your expenses looking out. And if this is something that's just going to be a cash drain on the house, then it's something that we look at other alternatives. We also have to put it in context with what are the other assets that can be divided. So is there enough cash to buy someone out of the house? Typically, this is the third issue I really see all the time is a married couple have two large assets, equity in the house and retirement assets. Neither one are very liquid. So sometimes someone will say, here, you can take 500,000 in retirement assets and I'll take that 500,000 equity in the house. Those are not apples to apples comparison because you will have to pay tax on that 500,000 in retirement accounts someday, whereas the 500,000 in equity in the house is already after tax money that's been spent that above the 250,000 in gain. It could be subject to a capital gains tax, but it's not the same as the tax that you're going to pay on retirement assets. So so we look at the scheme of things. Is there a brokerage account that could possibly be used for taxes to cover the buyout too? Really, the long and the short of it is what you really want to do is this is your largest asset. Get creative when it comes to the house. There's a lot of things to think about. I immediately draw in Renee, Laura to value the house to let you know. Something else that I think is really important, and Renee talked a little bit about it too, is qualifying for a mortgage. So one of the best things to could possibly set up is if you think that you're going to assume the mortgage or you're going to have to qualify for a mortgage if you're buying and the other spouse out, is you want to get your support payments started as soon as possible, even if they're temporary support payments, because most mortgage lenders need between 4 and 6 months of demonstrated payment for those support payments to count as income. That's something that you may want to immediately, if your settlement negotiations are extending over a long period of time, then that's something you want to talk to either the mediator or attorney your spouse about is getting different scenario, getting some support in place. And as you can see, we do have an example of one of the scenario that we talked about, and it's just really important to think about how the capital gains are going to impact you. And that's why it's important to add a CDFA to your team, even if it's just to review. I've had people hire me just for a couple hours to review the final settlement agreement, or to brainstorm capital creative solutions to be able to keep the house. It's a big decision and there's lots of things to think about. So hopefully from the financial side, I know we've given you a lot of examples, and then certainly I'd be happy to talk with you each about your specific case and what your ultimate goals are, and trying to help. Our goal is to work as a team to help you meet that goal.
Great. Adrian, I think It's going to wrap us up.
Okay. Well, everyone, I'm going to put my info in the chat here. All right. So I'm Adrienne Boulogne, and I'm a psychotherapist and a transformation coach specializing in divorce and relational intelligence. I am also divorced myself and a single mom. I work with couples, co-parents, and singles to help them recover and thrive in relationships. And I've put my info in the chat so that we can connect. My services are available virtually from anywhere in the country. So, lots of financial and practical things to consider about how to handle your family home in the process of divorce. Divorcing couples have a variety of ways that they do this. If you are considering remaining in a shared home for some time, you really need to take into account how it can impact your psychological stability. Divorce and rebuilding is one of the most profound challenges that your family will ever face. You'll likely have already been in a situation where you've been surviving for a long time. That resonates with you. And you don't want to delay getting to the thriving part any longer than you have to. So consider that along with the other things that you have to juggle and prioritize. There can be a lot of natural resistance to making too many changes all at once, too. So just remember that can be a little bit of a trap your mind can put you in when you're overwhelmed, you're fearful, you're thinking of things like, I feel like this is going to devastate the kids when I talk to them about this, about the family home. This is really going to be the moment where everything's going to be going public. I have to be facing the grief and the disconnect from this life. There's a lot of things to be concerned about. People are often worried about parenting solo because they've been used to relying on someone else to take care of certain aspects. And you're going to be needing to take all that on yourself. So it's not something that people can easily jump into, but I would encourage you all to consider how important it is, the alternate choice if you want to stay in your home and you're doing any sort of shared living arrangement, going back and forth, nesting, all the different variations that people come up with. If that's truly what is the best thing for you to do, or if you maybe want to be making a different decision to speed things along. So, fear causes us to stay stuck in survival mode and often make choices that are not in the best interest of everyone involved. Something that I do is I help individuals and co parents think over the unhealthy dynamics that they were unsuccessful in changing while they were married, and thinking about what those aspects were and appreciating that the only way to move forward from them is to really dissolve them. And the only way you can do that is to dissolve them with a brand new relational contract. That would be a very difficult thing to do if you're still in the conditioning of your old home environment and the ways that those roles have been divided up in the past. So I talk with people about what this new relational contract needs to be, whether they're going to stay in the house or they're going to be moving out and changing where they're living. But it needs to be a business-like partnership no matter what. And that means there needs to be clear expectations and really setting up of parallel lives. Issues like ineffective communication, betrayal, conflict, power struggles, undue burden of responsibilities, disrespect. These are all difficult things to walk cleanly away from when you're still sharing a space. Thriving happens when you can establish a peaceful and private space to heal. And in that space, you can grow, you can develop yourself as a whole self. It includes establishing new routines, new supports, and putting the attention on the things and the people that matter most to you. Kids really thrive, and I love working with parents around this issue. Kids really thrive when their parents are thriving. So you really want to think about, how does that look to them? How can I make sure that I'm not just surviving and kind of feeling hijacked in a situation that needs to change? So kids really thrive when their parents are thriving. They benefit from transparency and honesty the most. And I often help parents with age appropriate solutions on how to do that and how to talk about it and think about it with them. The more they understand, the more included they feel in this process, and less like it's something that's happening to them or even something that they're responsible for.
they feel like you consider how they feel if you're talking to them. They feel like it matters to them and they can speak up about something that they either want or they have a question about or they're confused about, worried about. A lot of times it's things like, how am I going to see my friends? How am I going to make sure that my little world isn't going to be disrupted? And those are all things that you could probably easily answer if we knew that was the utmost thing on their mind. Just like you, they benefit from your undivided attention and bandwidth. They really want to have a peaceful environment. They want to be shaping the new traditions with you in the new homes that they're going to be experiencing. And they want to see healthy relationships play out in front of them. Divorce agreements and parenting plans also benefit from environments that are kind of going to be the new normal and not having a transitional experience for longer than it needs to be, if possible. And those divorce agreements and parenting plans benefit from the more honest consideration about how to balance all of the realities of the responsibilities and the roles that you play in the co parenting relationship. It's a little hard to do that when most of the planning work is happening in a transitional environment because it lacks the reality of divvying things up and people having to take on new challenges or potentially even making different decisions about what they're going to be involved in or what they're going to be able to manage on their own. The best way to avoid having kids feeling caught in the middle of a divorce or feeling responsible for their parents' problems is to really separate the parenting from the broken relationship. And this will allow for more trust in a secure relationship with each parent. And co parenting counseling and support can ensure this for the children and help the parents develop their new separate strides. A common strain that I see all the time between co parents is the assumption that everyone has to be the same at each home. Things like the space, the access to friends, routines, the experiences. These are all things that do not have to be equal in order to be enough or plenty for kids. It's something that we often worry about as adults and are less on their mind. They really want to have access to you. They want to feel secure. They want to feel included. They want to know what to expect. And you can have your own different experiences, parenting style, home style, vibe in that home, different people around them, different lifestyle, and still be as nurturing and as aligned with the values that you and your co parent agree with. It just takes a lot of coordination and a lot of boundaries around your ability to develop that privately on your own and have the space to do that. And the separation that I help people establish really helps ease the tension between parents. And it really gives you the space to heal and become whole again. And that is sometimes just as pressing as any of the financial and legal stability concerns that you might have. And I just would encourage you not to skip on the consideration of your own psychological health and how everyone in the family is going to be doing. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. Such good advice. Thank you, Adrian. I know the emotional part of this is never easy. Both Adrian and Michelle, great resources to deal with that. We're going to say goodnight.